hello. Hello. This is freaking us out. We're British, so we're not used to all this whooping
This
and
is very
cheering.
unfamiliar.
But it's very exciting, so thank you for being so lovely. So yes, as he said, I'm Terry White, the editor-in-chief of Time Out New York. And this lovely man to my left is Felix Barrett, who is the artistic director and founder of Punch Drunk. So how many people have actually seen a Punch Drunk production? Sleep No More? Yeah, most of you. What have the rest of you been doing? Like hiding under a rock? So do you want to talk to us a little bit off the bat about how you came up with the idea for Punch Drunk, kind of what led to its launch back in 2000?
So I'm a theatre director by trade, but I'm slightly disillusioned with the whole experience of this setup, why this is so unfamiliar for me. Because you're a passive here, you're watching us, there's a strange border between this abyss between us. And I was studying theatre at college and realised that everything about it was alienating. The people, the supporters, the crowd. And I wanted to put the audience on the stage in the middle of the action and make them the epicenter of the worlds that we create. So we tried to break all the rules of theatre that we could come up with. And it started as a big experiment. You know, what happens if you just change the context, shift their rule set, put them in the heart of the action? It's a real-world film, almost. And we've been playing with that ever since.
And you've now done 17 productions, is that right?
Yeah, give or take.
Do you have a favourite? Let's just bear in mind you're in New York City.
Sleep No More is like, is the first one that we've done it 3 times, and it sort of was teeny, medium, and then it arrived. So it will always have a place in my heart. But it's almost my favourite is the one that we did in the year 2000, where only 4 people saw it, and it was like the purest distillation. We did it for one night only, and it involved, even though it was 10 miles inland, we had to get permission from the Coast Guard because we shot a marine flare into the sky and turned about 3 square kilometres bright red to reveal, a field of about 200 scarecrows. But it's the fact that no one saw it that is makes me proud.
Apparently that's successful theatre. Nobody sees it.
Well, I think the whole thing about Punch Drunk is it's about the individual. And even though we've got a crowd of, 400 every night at the McKittrick, we see them as 400 individual audience members who are having their own experience. And we're trying to push against the conventions of, a mass appeal, them being sheep. We want you to have your own adventure. And I suppose it's why they're designed that way. And I suppose that show was the epitome of that, an hour by yourself being chased.
By?
A variety of characters. A king with a swollen face. You were trying to find a princess. It was a fairy tale. It was Halloween. And the creatures that you see out the corner of your eye, but when you turn to look, they're gone.
Oh. So your brain seems rather strange and brilliant. So where do you get your ideas and your inspiration from?
I'm in a variety of places. It's music is always a raw starting place, and if you can hear it, then you can see it. And it's just things that sort of tactile and visceral and that cut you to the quick.
And then how do you, because, anybody who's been to Sleep No More knows it's full of mind-blowing details that you miss. I've been 3 times. You see something different each time. The level of detail is astonishing. How do you go from having your big vision and then actually executing it on such a sort of tiny level?
We've got a killer team. Everyone who works at the McKittrick are amazing. And but within, so a conventional theatre show would have, your set department, your scenic, carpentry and everything. But we have a whole new unit which is just for detail. And so when a room is complete, and even a film probably would say, that's it, we're done. Beatrice Minns, who leads that department, would come in and then lift the pictures off the walls, inscribe a little message, put it back, and it's the stuff that you're not going to find on your first go or your second go, but maybe when you've been 5 times, there's a whole layer of narrative that's waiting for you. We want to sort of reward the curious.
And so it's constantly evolving, it's constantly being added to, changed?
Well, when we built it, it's multi-layered, but it is always undulating, and we never want to. if the audience know what they're going to get, then it completely defeats the object for us. So therefore, we have a responsibility to shift and that blurry territory at the sort of at the bottom. So there might well be some new secrets in very soon.
How soon?
Well, if I can get back in time.
So actually, let's go back a little bit. Can you explain, for those people in the audience who haven't been, and seriously, what have you been doing? Then can you explain Sleep No More in 10 words or less?
10 words. Sleep No More is Macbeth as a Hitchcock thriller across 3 warehouses in Chelsea.
Did anyone count? I stopped counting. That was probably 10. So people see Macbeth in it, and you mentioned Hitchcock. What other things are woven in there?
So we were trying to, it's basically, we wanted to tell the Shakespeare, that, the Scottish play, through the lens of that sort of film noir landscape. We wanted the audience to feel as though they've plunged inside a living movie. And, the similarities with the Shakespeare having, this driven, ambitious, femme fatale, paranoia, doubt, murder, guilt, all the sort of tropes of noir are in the play. So it's a mash between the two, and then sprinkle on a little bit of historical detail about the witch trials in Paisley. The last 7 people to be executed for witchcraft feature quite heavily in our show.
And what is it about immersive theatre, do you think, that connects with an audience today?
I think we live in such a crazy time where technology is exponentially increasing and becoming part of the fabric of our life. And because of that, and everything's so accessible, having simple interactions with a real living person, having touch, something that only one person can experience, becomes so precious. It's when everything is one click away, anybody can have it. But when you're the one person who a performer reaches out to and takes you by the hand and unlocks a door and takes you inside, shuts the door, and you're closed off for 3 minutes, that no one else is going to know what happens within. It's magical. So I think why there's increasing propensity to go to this world, it's because audiences are craving it. And it's our challenge as makers to keep changing it slightly so they don't get too comfortable.
And do you think, so there is an element of escape, really, for people in this day and age?
Maybe when I was younger, I would have thought it was escapism. Now I think it's almost empowerment. It's like, when do you ever get to take control of yourself and almost be selfish so that you can craft your own journey, your own night out, whether you want to dive into raw narrative or whether you want to go and see a great band, you're constantly in charge. So I think it's actually about reminding the individuals that they have total autonomy over themselves and they should go for it.
You do have, but you also, when you go to Sleep No More, there are rules, like a few very basic but very strict rules. And I find it slightly fascinating because we're New Yorkers, we're not used to being told what to do or towing the line particularly well. And yet people are very compliant. Did you expect them just to be immediately compliant, especially in a city like New York?
Yeah, weirdly, I love New York City because the audience are the most hungry we've ever come across. And so they're compliant, but they're also quite frenzied. So I remember when we opened the show, we thought, wow, we've got so much beautiful detail and so many secrets. Maybe they'll find them. And at the end of the first night, the entire set was ransacked. And so now there's a huge team of people who are constantly restoring. It's a full-time job. So that sort of desire to be the person who's first and to want to solve it and to crack it, I think the English is slightly more reserved, and we have to sort of encourage them out. Like, God, you can come closer to the performers. There's they get the rule set, they embrace it wholeheartedly. And it's tough keeping up with them.
So I suppose, do you think it's the aggression that we're used to as New Yorkers that enables us to fully enjoy something like Sleep No More?
Yeah, I think maybe the pace of this city suits an environment where I suppose Sleep No More, even though it's a 3-hour experience, if you put it on stage, it's probably about 8 hours long. So that sort of hunger to get it done works. I think it's just also the warmth as well. There's a sort of sense that New Yorkers are so open for anything that they'll just go with it. Actually, weirdly, in London, we've got far more audience who would come a little bit wary and maybe say, "Oh, this is not for me," whereas New Yorkers just are in.
I mean, the one thing I think New Yorkers probably struggle with a little bit with Sleep No More is the touching that you refer to. So we can be open, but anybody here anyone's ever tried to touch you on a subway, it's like, I will harm you. I will cause you physical harm. And I think that's probably, from my experience, that people who've gone, they're like, oh my God, what if somebody touches me? What if somebody touches me? But do you think when people are there, they just kind of lose themselves in the experience?
I suppose, but for us, it's super important that narrative is a driving force, and although there is touch is involved, it's never as a gimmick, and it's never there for sort of titillation or just sort of sensory punctuation. It's about connection with a living person. It's about humanity. So I'd hope that in any of the situations in Sleep No More where you're at close proximity to a performer, it's more about intimacy and that sort of and a relationship that you would only have with a lover or a family member, and you're going with it. And then when you're working at that place, if it's the story is driving it rather than anything trashy, the audience roll with it, and you're working at a sort of layer of base emotion, and that's what's so exciting, because how do you tell a story to your gut rather than your head?
And can you talk a little bit about the importance of the masks?
Totally crucial. Without the mask, it would all collapse. The mask is our theatre seat. It achieves anonymity for the performers. It allows them to become a voyeur. It allows them to almost paste on top of it whatever they want to be, however they want to play the night. And it's very interesting. Even this week, we've been trying something with multiple audiences in a space without a mask, and it doesn't work. It works, but it's a different form of theatre, and it's not what we do.
And why do you think these sort of anonymity, I can't even say that word, anonymity is important?
Because we want to empower the audience to really have the freedom to do whatever they want to do. And it's kind of, everything you grew up with, when you go into a museum, you're told, don't touch that. With this, you can do it. It's your discretion. So the idea is, it comes from 15 years ago, we did our first show. One night only, we tried the masks out, and a middle-aged woman came up to me at the end and said, I'm so sorry, I completely ruined the show. I put the mask on, I became someone else, and I ended up sitting on a performer's knee, and I'm so embarrassed. We're like, yes, this works. There's something here. And it was actually it was just an experiment, and because of her response, we thought, we should do this again and see what happens if we... Yeah, so it's anonymity enables you to become the person you might want to be for that night.
And in terms of the structure, when you experience it, it can kind of feel like there is no structure, but actually, presumably, the structure that underpins it is incredibly important.
Oh my gosh, yeah. The structure is absolutely key. It's the most meticulously choreographed thing. Every single beat, even though it feels like it's a flippant bit of improvisation, a brush and a glance, is set. And it kind of has to be, because otherwise the whole thing the performers will have a lot of power, and so do the audience, and that battle would shift and throw it off balance. I had a nice thing where I wasn't in the city for about 9 months because we had a baby back home, and coming back to see the show again after all that time, and it feeling like a little distant echo, I thought, how set is this? So I stood in the place that you would do. Just what I wanted to check was I thought that when I'd left, a performer would turn around and clock me out of all the audience. And sure enough, it happened. And it was just respect due to the performers and to the team for applying the rigidity needed so that it feels slightly out of control.
And do you think that's what brings people back? Because I think, you know, as I say, I've been 3 times. The first time I was like, oh, bugger, did I do it wrong? Because my friends had such a different experience to me. And I was like, oh, God, I missed X, Y, and Z. And then the second time I went was completely different. And then the third one. So the very fact that it is, you know, this adventure you create for yourself is presumably what takes you back time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, the coming back time and time again thing is just a sort of, that's unintentional. It's just a byproduct. I mean, obviously you can have a night where everything lands, or you can have a night where you're chasing everything, but it's it's more to do with your attitude and the way that you treat it. And I think, I mean, that's the thrill for us, is that when a group of people come as a unit, are split up, are scattered across the building, and then come together in the bar at the end going, oh my gosh, did you see the hospital? Someone says, hospital? There was no hospital. And then we know it's working. Yeah. And I think that's why there are so many secrets within it, because for the people who, I almost think it's a show that's better second time round, because once you understand the rule set, then you can see the arena you're dealing with, and it's about trying to burrow into the secrets.
So the McKittrick is an amazing venue. Can you talk a little bit about what your vision for that was initially, and sort of the scale of how you actually executed it?
Well, I think the brilliance of our producers, Immersive, and the whole team there was about like trying to do something that's, we had a desire to theatricalize the night out, and we've always thought that the building was sort of versatile enough to do that in a variety of different ways. So you can eat, you can drink, you can play, everything has a sort of theatrical veneer, but it's almost getting down to sort of the day-to-day building blocks. I mean, the only thing you can't do in there is sleep. And maybe sometime we'll have to put another floor on and add that in.
I saw some bunk beds on the roof in the winter, so I did have a lie down.
Yeah, I mean, the cast have slept in there. I personally wouldn't want to, because it's slightly haunted.
Oh, golly. What's your take on traditional theatre?
Well, I mean, I love it. That's that's what I grew up on, and that's what inspired me to be making work now. I think what we're doing isn't a rejection of conventional theatre. It's just we want to try something different. We want to try something that is physical as well as cerebral.
So where do you go next from that? What's the next frontier for theatre?
Well, for what we're doing, I think it's about duration. I think what's exciting is seeing audiences want to be in these worlds, and what happens if they're allowed to stay for longer in the worlds. That's something that we're thinking about. But then it's almost, if the fourth wall is gone, what happens if you take down the third wall and the second wall and the first wall? And what happens if the theatre is real world? And you are the lead character. We're fascinated about the potential for that. And also it's interesting you said about rule sets and like the systems in place. We're playing with taking rule sets from different mediums and then applying them to the live. Like what happens when you take Candy Crush on your cell phone, but stage it as a show. By the way, I don't know what the answer to that is, but might be cool.
So I think we've got time for one last question from me, which is, outside of your own productions, what's the best experience you've ever had? I mean, I read you had a pretty epic stag do, bachelor party.
Yeah, my bachelor party was crazy. I mean, it's a huge, good thing there's a clock, because I would bore you senseless. It's but basically started with digging up a chest on the River Thames, following a map. Inside that chest was a series of photographs, old school technology, and on these photographs were pictures of a computer screen with a single word, and it said, "Hello, Felix, well done for finding this. Now we can start to get dangerous." By the way, it's a hot summer's evening, there's people everywhere, so I'm just reading these photographs. If you want to play, raise your right arm now. And I had this reverse dolly backtrack where suddenly, as I looked around, hundreds of people, any one of them could have been a performer, and I didn't know. And then I had 3 months of missions, being attacked in the streets, coming home to my cat. My cat jumped up on me, and she was wearing a collar, which she didn't do normally, and on the collar, embossed in metal, was Felix, your next mission is whatever. And it culminated in a lot of pain, which I probably can't say now because it's before the watershed.
Excellent. Okay, I think now we're going to open the floor to questions from you guys.
Hi, hello. I was wondering, since your company creates such an immersive experience, and you were mentioning mixing new and old media, have you considered incorporating any of the virtual technologies that are coming out in, like, Oculus Rift or any kind of headset?
Yeah, most definitely. In fact, we've been doing some testers at Sleep No More. And in fact, I'm going back to London next week to edit it. But it's fascinating what's available now, and the sensation of VR is quite similar to being within Sleep No More. So yes, and much more to come on that.
Hi. Whoa. Sorry.
They're powerful.
I know. So I guess, your shows are all site-specific, and I'm wondering if there are any importances to the sites that you specifically choose for your shows.
Buildings are difficult to get, so we're not in a position to be sort of precious about, we can only use a hospital, even though that would be nice. But the fun bit comes from taking the stories that are within there and the sort of flavors and feelings and allowing them to feed the show. So when we start a show, the cast's first day in the building, we play a game of hide and seek where they get to be a child again. But it's proper 3 hours of hardcore hide and seek. And everyone's playing the buildings almost in show mode, and we ramp the aggression, so it's quite frightening. And they're finding all the nooks and crannies, and their objective is to try and work out what the safest place in the building is and what the most threatening space is. And then at the end of this week, it's crazy. They all go rogue and totally wild, and we have to sort of talk them down off the walls. And then we come back, and we almost are able to build a road map, an architectural map of atmosphere. And you can see the spaces that people draw towards the people. And the safe spaces then become the safe spaces within the narrative. So it becomes the places where lovers meet, or children are nursed, and then the threatening spaces become the sites of murder and mutilation and the sort of the horror of it. But to be honest, in terms of buildings, we would use anything. If you find us a space, there's always a show waiting to be done. And actually, my favorite part of the job is walking around a building for the first time, just responding to it.
Hi.
Hi.
My question is about the first performance on opening night. What is your biggest fear, and what is the biggest surprise?
The biggest surprise is, why did we not have 5 more weeks of rehearsal? And why? Yeah, it's the fear is, with our work, the audience is such a critical part of it that you can never quite plan everything. So even though it drives everybody crazy, there are a lot of changes happen in the final home straight. And you never really know what you get. You can preempt an audience. You always think, well, they're clearly going to follow the lady in the red dress. And then they discover the secret passage. And so it's almost like we have to adjust to them. And there's times like that I wish we just do on a stage, and you could make some notes and it would be fine, and then off it would go. So it's listening to the crowd. And again, if it's too easy or if it's too obvious, then we need to go back to the drawing board again.
Hey.
Hi.
So you've touched on sort of the difference between a traditional show and something like this, and I'm really curious about, at those beginning stages in its smallest form, what does that rehearsal process look like as compared to a normal show? Is it narrative driven? Is it character? How much is responding to the space? And where do you draw your inspiration from?
So it's critically important, actually, that in the first half of a rehearsal process, it's exactly the same as if we were going to do a Broadway show or a studio-based show or whatever. So in the rehearsal studio, and we're just working on the story and building material, and the building actually is irrelevant. We're almost building a show as if we were going to perform it in a conventional space, because without that rigor and that discipline, you can so easily be distracted by the tricks. Like, you know, if performers are here, they would be up this frame before we had any material. So it's first and foremost, you need story to land. And I think that's maybe one of the misconceptions about this form, that actually it's exactly the same process as any other. And then you flip it. So once you've got a show that could be performed in a studio, then you hit the space. And then because you've got a solid base, you can play, you can run, you can subvert, which you do probably for the first day and a half, and then it's a mad dash to actually build material, because certainly, Sleep No More 6, 7, 8 hours long on a stage, it's a shocker to get ready in 10 weeks.
We have time for one more question. Hi. I haven't seen your production of Sleep No More, but I have seen The Drowned Man.
Great.
So, yeah, I had a question about what your inspiration was for that project and how you came up with the concept for it, and also what it was like working on that after Sleep No More, how what you learned from Sleep No More affected your process on that show.
So Sleep No More is about claustrophobia and about paranoia and the walls coming in on you. Drowned Man, we wanted to do, was a very different space. So the first time I walked around it, it was a London show in a big set in a 1960s film studio, Hollywood. And the play was Wojciech by George Buchner. But it was about scale, and it was about the epic, and it was about heat, and it was about desperation. So I think normally, it was the actual sort of the architecture that defined that show, but the rules set are the same. We took everything we learned from Sleep No More, and then we tried to build on it. We never want to sort of stay static. We always want to be trying to move forwards, trying to innovate. And so that if an audience who might have seen Sleep No More came to see The Drowned Man, then it will be offering more. So we're constantly raising the bar. It was a great show. And they knocked down the building for Crossrail back in London. So it is now over.
Great, so I think that's it. Just want to thank you guys for coming, and more importantly, thanks Felix for being amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.